Hare Krishna everyone, we'll be reading from chapter 15th of 7th Canto of Srimad Bhagavatam from Brilliant as the Sun, a retelling of Srimad Bhagavatam. The title of the chapter is Instructions for Civilized Humanity. Mukham karoti vachalam pangum langhite girim yat kripatamam vande Shri Gurum Dintarinam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram Hari Om Tat Sat. Yudhishthir glanced around the assembly. Many Brahmins were present, his court priests, itinerant sages like Narad, ascetics, and many more. Folding his palms, he asked, "Are all Brahmins to be respected equally?" Narad smiled. "An excellent question, King Yudhishthir. There are different gradations. Those who are married are attached to Vedic rituals and duties. They are known as Vipras. Those who are brahmacharis like to study. They like to study and teach the Vedas. Vanaprasths focus on performing austerities, while the sannyasis are absorbed in spiritual knowledge. Those who desire liberation for themselves and their forefathers should give charity to Brahmins who are fixed in transcendence. If there are none available, one should give charity to those engaged in Vedic rituals." Yudhishthir said, "While in family we must perform regular sacrifices to the gods and to the forefathers. Are there any guidelines on how many Brahmins we should give charity to at these times?" "Oh yes, when offering Vedic sacrifices to the gods, you only need to invite 2 Brahmins, but you need 3 when making offerings to the forefathers. If the Brahmin is fixed in transcendental realization, you only need 1 such Brahmin for either occasion. Since the royal order and wealthy merchants can afford to invite more, should we?" Narad shook his head. "No, one should spend extravagantly for such occasions." Yudhishthir looked surprised. "Why not? If you try to accommodate too many guests, there will be undoubtedly mistakes in terms of when and where to hold the ceremony. Which of your guests should attend to, and you should give them, and how they should all be worshipped. Better keep it simple. Choose an auspicious day for the ceremony, offer your deity food cooked in ghee, and offer the prasad to an advanced Vaishnav or Brahmin. That's all you must do to secure your everlasting happiness. When offering the Lord's remnants to anyone, whether a god, saintly person, your forefathers, people in general, or your family members and friends, you should consider that person Krishna's devotee. Therefore, one who properly understands religious principles never offers anyone forbidden foods like meat, eggs, or fish during the Shraddh ceremony." To his right, Yudhishthir noticed how some kings looked uncomfortable. He knew they ate the animals they killed when hunting. He said, "Great sage, when a king does the Shraddh ceremony, can he at least eat meat? After all, meat is permitted for kings." Narad shook his head. "Not as part of the Shraddh rites. You are trying to benefit your forefathers by preparing suitable foods in ghee and offering them to a saintly person. The forefathers will only benefit if the rites satisfy Krishna. You should know that Krishna is never pleased when animals are killed in the name of such sacrifices. Indeed, my dear king, anyone who wants to advance in spiritual realization should bear this in mind. Krishna is most pleased when a person gives up all envy and violence toward other living beings. This includes thinking unkindly of others, speaking harshly to them, or harming their bodies. There is no higher religious principle." Yudhishthir leaned forward. "Is this a realistic expectation to have of most people? Such self-control is not possible in someone who is materially ambitious, but it is for those who desire to stop the miseries of birth and death and return home to Godhead. Their consciousness is purer than those who still desire gross or subtle material happiness. I understand the importance of giving up violence to fellow human beings, said Yudhishthir. However, it seems the Vedas sanction some violence toward animals, for example, killing them as a part of Vedic sacrifice. Is it because animals do not feel suffering as humans do? Why do you think like that? Why do you think that? They are aware of the danger and feel extreme fear. When they sense the priests approaching them, they know they are about to be mercilessly slaughtered. Knowing this, a person who understands religious principles and wishes to refrain from cruelty even to the poor animals is happy to perform his daily worship and the required occasional rituals by offering foodstuffs easily available by Krishna's grace. Yudhishthir looked confused, yet the Vedas sanction this and other forms of violence. People do not properly understand the Vedas, and therefore, in the name of Vedic injunctions, they often perform 5 types of irreligion: Vidharma, Paradharma, Abhas Dharma, and Upadharma and Chaladharma. Only one who has developed good intelligence can differentiate between these 5 types of irreligion and real religion. Such discrimination is awakened by association with devotees and the practice of Krishna consciousness. Yudhishthir said, "Please explain clearly how to associate with such devotees and what it means to practice Krishna consciousness." Narad said, "Associating with devotees means hearing from them. This is critical for self-realization. The caliber of devotees you hear from is also important. You must hear from the topmost devotee who is learned in the Vedas, has realized the eternal relationship with Krishna, and is exclusively engaged in his service. The other practices of Krishna consciousness, besides hearing from a liberated devotee, are explained by Prahlad as to follows: to glorify Krishna by repeating what you have heard, to remember his glories, and to worship his lotus feet by serving those who are dear to him, to offer him formal worship, to offer him prayers, to become his servant. To consider Krishna one's best friend, and to surrender everything you do with your body, mind, and words to him. However, none of these other processes of Krishna consciousness can be done properly unless one has sufficiently and properly heard about him from the right source. Yudhishthir thanked Narad and asked him to explain the 5 types of irreligion clearly. Narad said, "All these distortions that people mistakenly think are religion, Vidharma means to act in a way that departs from the right path of religion. Paradharma means imitating religious principles for which one is unfit. Upadharma means in the name of following the Vedas to introduce speculative practices. Chaladharma means to misinterpret and misapply the teachings of the Vedas. One should be extremely careful to avoid these various types of cheating religious systems. People who are misguided either by their speculations or those of others make a show of being transcendentally situated while neglecting their varnashram duties. On the other hand, those who follow varnashram rules appropriate for them can mitigate all material miseries." Yudhishthir said, "How can we tell if a Brahman is transcendently situated and no longer needs to follow these rules and regulations? Even if he is poor, a Brahman who is transcendental to the modes of nature makes no effort to improve his economic condition nor to become famous as a religious man. Like the python, he is satisfied with whatever food he gets. Without endeavor, he is content and satisfied in any situation, for he feels the presence of the Supersoul within his heart and thinks of him 24 hours a day. This is transcendental happiness. A materialist impelled by lust and greed always strives to acquire wealth. Such a person can never imagine the happiness experienced by the transcendentalist. Surely he must sometimes be disturbed by feelings of hunger and fatigue," said Yudhishthir. Narad said, "There is no danger even when walking across pebbles or thorns for a person wearing suitable shoes. Similarly, a self-realized transcendentalist is never distressed in any situation, but he always feels the greatest happiness. Even if he has nothing to eat, he is satisfied by drinking a little water. Only one who is a slave to the senses, especially the tongue and genitals, seeks wealth from others. If a Brahman is not satisfied with excuse me, what is easily obtained, he becomes greedy to increase his sense gratification and will lose his spiritual strength. Education, austerity, reputation, and knowledge of the three causes of material bondage, lust, anger, and greed. Greed is most dangerous. Why is it that? Lust is the urge to satisfy immediate bodily cravings like hunger and thirst. As soon as these are satisfied, lust subsides. Similarly, when a person is angry, lashing out at the object of anger makes the anger recede. Greed, however, never diminishes, no matter how much it is indulged. Many learned and powerful men have fallen into a hellish condition of life because they were not satisfied with what they possessed. Yudhishthira sat in thought. He knew that lust, anger, and greed were just some of the many enemies an aspiring transcendentalist must overcome. He said, "Pray tell me, Holy One, is there any way one can vanquish all the obstacles to spiritual advancement?" Narad replied, "It is unavoidable for a man to think of women. After all, it is inevitable that we will see them. However, if he makes a firm determination never to live with women, he will not become lusty on seeing them. The same principle applies to food and drink. If you want to fast on a particular day, start by making a firm determination that you will not eat or drink, and then it will be possible. Similarly, with anger, it can be conquered when you firmly determine you will not harm anyone. Giving up greed takes more than a firm determination. It can only be overcome by discussing the troubles associated with accumulating wealth. Likewise, to overcome fear, discuss the true nature of reality. We must understand that nothing happens accidentally. Instead, our actions determine our good and evil destiny. Lamentation and illusion are very difficult to overcome. For example, most people will be overwhelmed with grief of a beloved child if a beloved child dies untimely. However, discussing spiritual truths can help us overcome such illusory occurrences. Cultivate good behavior and give up inflicting suffering on all creatures by consciously acting to benefit them. Thus, they will be less inclined to inflict sufferings on you. Similarly, to avoid pains from your own body and mind and reduce the need to sleep, practice eating simply and in small amounts. Yoga exercises and breath control will help you preserve your health. Despite all such precautions, it is inevitable that due to past karma you will experience suffering. When this happens, you will alleviate the miseries by focusing the mind on Krishna. The easiest way to do is by chanting the Mahamantra Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Why must we suffer in the material world? Asked Yudhishthira. The root cause of misery is the three modes of nature. How can we become free of their influence? By cultivating the mode of goodness, replied Narad. The yogis and jnanis have many methods for this, such as yama and niyam. The influence of goodness is overcome when we develop indifference to the results of our actions. All this is most easily achieved by service to the spiritual master with faith and devotion. Why is such service so important? The bona fide spiritual master is not a conditioned soul but a spiritual expansion of the Lord, competent to give transcendental knowledge. If you mistakenly consider him a conditioned soul, you will become frustrated in your spiritual advancement and return to your previous sinful activities. An example which comes to mind illustrating the fate of such a foolish disciple is that an elephant who, after bathing, again covers himself with dirt. Yudhishthira said, "Is there not a danger that unqualified people will assume the role of a spiritual master to exploit the unsuspecting public?" Narad nodded. "Yes, unfortunately, there are such people but they are only perverted reflections of the genuine Guru. That is why the scriptures advises one to carefully scrutinize a prospective spiritual master. You must be satisfied that he can solve your life's problems. Similarly, the spiritual master should only accept a qualified disciple. What qualities must the disciple have? He must be well behaved, meek, obedient, and self controlled. Specifically regarding sex desires, what is the essential quality to look for in a spiritual master? The specific qualification for representing Krishna is to be unaffected by the material modes of nature. Such a pure devotee is satisfied in all circumstances and is never disturbed by lust, material material desire, hankering, inactivity, or any other type of material foolishness. In other words, he harms no one. Such a spiritual master is the mercy offered is the mercy manifestation of Krishna and should never be offered the same respect. Even a slight deviation from the understanding can create disaster in the disciples' studies and practices. His family and friends will inevitably see him as a normal man, said Yudhishthir. How then can this student see otherwise? His Lord Ramchandra, Supreme Personality, of course, said Yudhishthir. Even so, many of his contemporaries consider him to be an ordinary human being. If fools can think that of the Lord himself, doubtlessly someone will think the spiritual master to be an ordinary human. Sure, there is a difference between Lord Ram and the spiritual master. The difference is that the spiritual master is the Sevak Bhagwan and Rama is the Savior Bhagwan. In other words, the spiritual master is the worshipper of the God and Ram is the worshipable God. Yudhishthir said, I have heard from sages emphasize strictly following the Ashtanga Yoga process as the best Yudhishthir said, I have heard some sages emphasize strictly following the Ashtanga Yoga process are as the best of attaining one's life's perfection. Yet others say that the best process is rigid adherence to the regulative principles of Varnashram and the performance of the Vedic Yet others say the best process of rigid adherence to the regulative principles of Varnashram and the performances of the Vedic sacrificial rituals. They stress this over and over again and service to the liberated spiritual master. Narad shrugged. These are all means to control the senses, but that is not the ultimate perfection. One must come to the point of constant meditation on Krishna without reaching this point. All one's efforts are a waste of time. However, simply by rendering service to the spiritual master, one crosses the ocean of material existence and returns home back to Godhead, where no one can see the Supreme Lord face to face and enjoy life in this association. Narad fell quiet. Absorbed in thought, he knew that the misconceptions Yudhishthir spoke of were widely held. Sighing, he said, "Similarly, good adherence to the sorry." He added, "Similarly, rigid adherence to varnashram does not guarantee spiritual advancement. These duties bring success in the material life, not in These duties bring success in material life, not in spiritual realization. They are only spiritually helpful when the performer Sayagyi said, "Similarly, rigid adherence to varnashram does not guarantee spiritual advancement. These duties bring success in material life, not in spiritual realization. They are only spiritually helpful when the performer engages in Krishna's devotional service." Is it possible to attain perfection at post of Ashtanga Yoga? Yes, but one must leave the family to live in a solitary place, free from any worldly association. Otherwise, the Ashtanga Yogi cannot overcome all traces of material desire. Living as sannyasi, he should keep his body and the soul together by begging just enough to acquire the bare necessities of life. This keeps the sannyasi humble, meek, and free from the material desires. He should also seek out a holy place. Here he should select a site which is neither too high nor too good. Similarly, if the mind becomes diverted and yogi brings back to the Lord, sitting there with his I think we will continue our reading next time. Thank you for joining. Hari Om Tat Sat, Hare Krishna. We still have to go through quite a bit of chapter 15 before we conclude this chapter. We'll carry this on next time. Hari Om Tat Sat, Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Samved Bhaktivinoda ki jai.